7 years ago, my entire life came crashing down in a single day. I was 22, living with my parents, saving up to move out and just trying to get my footing in life. Then, out of nowhere, my older sister wrecked everything. Samantha Sam, for short, was 30 at the time. We were never close, mainly because of the 8-year age gap. By the time I was in high school, she was already married to her longtime boyfriend, Ryan. Their marriage lasted 3 years before she suddenly filed for divorce. And somehow, she managed to make me the villain in her story. She stormed into our family home one night, sobbing uncontrollably, and announced that Ryan had been cheating on her. But she didn't just blame him, she blamed me. According to her, I was responsible because I had introduced him to the woman he allegedly had an affair with. That woman was Lisa, a girl I barely knew outside of casual conversations. She was a nutritionist and had been looking for a certified personal trainer to help her with her diet plan. Since Ryan was a fitness coach, I connected them. That was it. No secret affair, no setup, just a simple introduction. But Sam? She twisted it into something monstrous. She claimed Lisa and Ryan had been sneaking around behind her back for months and that I had helped make it happen. She told my parents that if I hadn't introduced them, none of this would have happened. And just like that, my parents took her side. No questions, no hesitation. I was blindsided. I kept saying, "This doesn't make sense. Why would I do something like that?" But they wouldn't listen. My mom was crying, my dad was furious, and Sam was playing the perfect victim. They called me a disgrace, said they didn't want to see me anymore. And within an hour, I was packing my things. I begged. I pleaded. I swore on everything I loved that I had nothing to do with their divorce. But it was like screaming into a void. My dad told me to get out. My mom wouldn't even look at me, and Sam just stood there, fake tears in her eyes, watching as I got thrown out of the only home I had ever known. I sat on the sidewalk with my bags, staring at the locked door in disbelief. It didn't even feel real. 1 minute, I had a family. The next, I had nothing. I tried calling them, over and over. Every call went straight to voicemail. I even tried going back the next day, thinking maybe they'd cooled down. My mom opened the door, looked me dead in the eyes, and told me that if I didn't leave, she would call the cops. That was when I knew I was completely alone. A friend of mine, Marcus, let me crash on his couch for a while. He was the only one who didn't look at me like I was a monster. He knew Lisa and didn't believe for a second that she would be involved with a married man. But none of that mattered because my parents had made up their minds. The following weeks were hell. I was scrambling to find a place to live, working extra shifts just to afford a tiny studio apartment, and trying to process the fact that my entire family had disowned me over a lie. Ryan had blocked me. Sam had cut me off. Lisa, the person I was accused of helping, had no idea what was happening. I kept replaying it over and over in my head. Why would she do this? Why was I the scapegoat? I had no answers. All I knew was that I had lost everything, and I had no way to fix it. Years passed, but the anger never really left me. I had built a new life one without my family, but the scars they left didn't fade. No matter how much I tried to push it away, there was always this dull ache inside me, a reminder that my own parents had tossed me aside like I was nothing. By the time I turned 29, I had a solid job, a nice apartment, and a woman I loved. Liza had been my rock through it all, even though she had only heard bits and pieces of what happened with my family. I never wanted to dump all my baggage on her, but she knew enough to understand why they weren't in my life. I was doing fine, or at least I thought I was. Then, one random afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. No sender name, no subject, just a single message sitting there, waiting for me to open it. At first, I almost ignored it. It reeked of spam, but something about it gnawed at me, like an itch in the back of my brain that wouldn't go away. So I clicked it, and in seconds, my entire world flipped upside down. The email was long, almost too long, and it started with 2 words that sent a chill down my spine. I'm sorry. As I read further, my hands started shaking. It was Ryan, the man I hadn't heard from in 7 years. The man my sister had accused of cheating. The man who had blocked me without a second thought. Except now, he was telling me the truth. and the truth was nothing like the story I had been fed. Sam had been the one cheating. Not just cheating, she had lied about everything. Ryan had found out about the affair near the end of their marriage. She had been seeing someone behind his back for months, sneaking around like it was a game. And when he confronted her, she panicked. Instead of owning up to what she had done, she flipped the story and painted him as the villain. And because she knew my parents would believe anything she said, she threw me under the bus to make sure I couldn't dig too deep. She had planned it. Every single step. Ryan had even attached proof emails between her and the guy she had been seeing. Screenshots of conversations where she laughed about how easy it was to manipulate our parents. She had even bragged about how she used me as a distraction, making sure I got the blame so that no one would suspect her. Reading it felt like my brain was short-circuiting. I had spent 7 years believing my family turned their backs on me because of a misunderstanding. But no, it wasn't a mistake, it was calculated. Sam had ruined my life on purpose. I don't know how long I sat there just staring at my screen. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to track her down and demand an explanation. But most of all, I just felt empty, like my entire life had been a joke. When Liza got home that night, she found me still sitting at my desk, the email open on the screen. I must have looked awful because her face immediately twisted in concern. Babe, what's wrong? I didn't know how to explain it. How do you even begin to put something like this into words? So I just told her to read it. By the time she finished, she was just as horrified as I was. You need to do something, she said, voice tight with anger. You can't just let her get away with this. And she was right. Sam had stolen years of my life. She had turned my own parents against me, left me struggling just to survive, and never once tried to fix what she had done. She had gotten away with it for far too long. It was time for that to change. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain replayed the past 7 years on a loop. But now, with the truth mixed in, every struggle, every rejection, every night spent wondering why it all led back to Sam. She had done this to me, on purpose. And for what? To cover up her own lies? To make sure she still had mom and dad wrapped around her finger? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. She had stolen my life just so she wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of her own actions. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The next morning, I reached out to Ryan. He had left his number in the email, along with an apology for blocking me all those years ago. Apparently, he had found out the full extent of Sam's lies 2 years after their divorce when he ran into Lisa at an event. She had told him how I had been cut off by my family for something that never even happened, and the guilt had been eating away at him ever since. I wasn't interested in his guilt. I wanted justice. We met up that afternoon at a small coffee shop, and as soon as I sat down, Ryan slid a thick envelope across the table. It's all in there, he said, looking genuinely remorseful. Everything you need to prove what really happened. Emails, screenshots, legal documents, even a copy of their divorce settlement, where Sam had agreed to give up our grandmother's diamond ring to Ryan because she couldn't afford to pay him what she owed. I flipped through it all, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just evidence. This was a weapon. She destroyed your life, Ryan said, watching my reaction. I figured you might want a chance to return the favor. He didn't need to say another word. I knew exactly what I had to do. 2 days later, I showed up at my parents' house for the first time in 7 years. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe some kind of emotional reaction, some grand reunion scene where my mother would burst into tears and my father would apologize for what they had done. But no. When my mom opened the door and saw me standing there, she just froze. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we need to talk." Before she could say anything, I stepped inside. The house smelled the same, like old wood and coffee, but it didn't feel like home anymore. My dad was sitting in his usual chair in the living room, flipping through the newspaper. When he saw me, his face twisted in confusion, then anger. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he snapped. "After everything you did to your sister?" I almost laughed. Even now, after all these years, they still thought I was the bad guy. "Yeah?" I said, dropping the envelope onto the coffee table. "Then you might want to read this before you embarrass yourself any further." My dad shot me a glare but grabbed the envelope anyway. My mom leaned over his shoulder, her hands clutching the fabric of her sweater as they flipped through the documents. And then the silence hit. It stretched on for so long that I almost thought neither of them would say anything. But then my mom gasped, her hand flying up to cover her mouth. My dad, on the other hand, turned a sickly shade of pale. What? What is this? He muttered. The truth, I said simply. The truth that you refused to believe 7 years ago. They kept flipping through the pages. The emails between Sam and her affair partner. The screenshots of her laughing about how easy it was to manipulate them. The proof that she had been the real cheater all along. When they reached the divorce documents, the part about the diamond ring, my dad slammed the papers onto the table and stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. Hannah! He bellowed. I almost flinched. I had forgotten how his voice could shake the walls. A few seconds later, Sam walked into the room, looking half asleep. She was still living here, still mooching off our parents like nothing had ever happened. What's with all the yelling? She grumbled, rubbing her eyes. My dad didn't even give her time to wake up properly. He threw the papers at her. Some of them slid to the floor, but she caught enough of them to glance down at the words. And the moment she realized what they were, her entire body stiffened. I can explain, she blurted out. No, my dad growled. You can't. My mom was already in tears. She wasn't saying anything, just staring at my sister like she was looking at a complete stranger. You lied to us, my dad continued, his hands shaking with rage. You let us throw him out over your lies, and you never once told us the truth? Sam did what she always did. She tried to weasel her way out. She started fake crying, rambling about how she had been in a bad place back then, about how she didn't want to hurt them, about how she didn't know what else to do. It was pathetic. But for the first time in her life, it wasn't working, because the evidence was right in front of them. They couldn't ignore it. They couldn't pretend I was the villain anymore. And my dad? He wasn't the forgiving type. Get out, he said, his voice eerily calm. Sam's head snapped up. What? You heard me, he growled. Pack your things and get out of my house. The panic on her face was almost satisfying. Almost. She turned to my mom, but for once, my mother didn't rush to her rescue. She just sat there, silent tears running down her face, looking like she had lost something important. Mom? Sam choked. You're really going to let him do this? But my mother just shook her head. You did this to yourself. And that was it. Sam was out. Just like I had been 7 years ago. But unlike me, she had earned it. Sam didn't leave quietly. She screamed. She cried. She begged. She swore up and down that this wasn't fair, that she had just been trying to protect herself, that I was the real problem here. But no one was buying it anymore. For the first time in her life, she had to face the consequences of her own actions. I stood there watching as she frantically tried to shove her things into a suitcase, her hands shaking too much to zip it up properly. She was panicking, her breathing ragged, like she couldn't believe this was really happening. I wanted to feel satisfied. I really did. But all I felt was done. This wasn't a game. This wasn't some dramatic movie moment where I'd walk out of there feeling triumphant. It was just sad. 7 years ago, she stood in this same house, watching as I packed up everything I owned and walked out into the unknown. I had no money, no backup plan, no idea how I was going to survive. And she had felt nothing. But now that it was her turn to leave, she was acting like the world was ending. She tried to pull the family card. Mom, Dad, you can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. But my dad just folded his arms. So was he. And you didn't care when we threw him out. Boom. Sam's face crumpled. I thought maybe she'd stop fighting at that point. Maybe she'd finally realize there was nothing left to say. But no. She turned to me, like I was the one who could fix this. You set this up, she accused, pointing a shaking finger at me. You came here just to ruin my life. I sighed. You ruined your own life, Sam. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. You had 7 years to come clean, my dad added. You chose not to. That was the final nail in the coffin. She wasn't getting out of this, and she knew it. With one last glare, she stormed past me, dragging her overstuffed suitcase down the hall. She yanked open the door and turned back, her face red with rage and tears. This isn't over, she spat. You'll regret this. Then she was gone. And just like that, the house was silent. I should have felt better, lighter. like some kind of weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But instead, I felt nothing. Mom sat down on the couch, still in shock. Her hands were clasped together like she was praying, but no words came out. Dad just stood there, jaw clenched, staring at the door like he was waiting for it to open again. Finally, he turned to me. I held up a hand. Don't. I wasn't ready for whatever half-hearted apology he was about to spit out. I don't need an explanation, I said. I don't need to hear that you didn't know or that you thought you were protecting her or whatever excuse you're going to give me. You made your choice 7 years ago. You didn't believe me. You didn't even give me a chance to defend myself. I expected him to fight back, to argue that he had just been looking out for Sam, that parents make mistakes, that he thought he was doing the right thing. But he didn't. He just sat down. He looked smaller now, weaker, like he had just realized he'd been living in a lie for years and didn't know how to fix it. Is there any way we can make this right? Mom finally whispered. I let out a dry laugh. You think it's that easy? That you can just undo everything with a few nice words? She flinched. I shook my head. You kicked me out when I had nothing. You let me struggle alone. You told me I was disgusting, that I had ruined Sam's life when I had done nothing wrong. And now you care? Silence. They didn't have an answer for that. You know what? I sighed. It doesn't even matter anymore. I didn't come here for you. I came here to make sure Sam didn't get away with what she did. Mom wiped her eyes. We were wrong. No kidding. I should have walked out right then. I should have left them with their guilt and never looked back. But some stubborn part of me, the part that still wanted closure, had to ask. Why? I said, my voice quieter now. Why was it so easy for you to throw me away? Dad looked me in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I saw something I had never seen before. Regret. It was raw. Real. It sat heavy on his face like it had been growing for years, even before today. We didn't plan for you, he admitted. That hit harder than I expected. Sam was the kid we had always wanted, he continued. When you came along, we tried, but she was always first. And when she needed us, we didn't even think twice. I nodded slowly. So it was just easier to believe her. He swallowed. Yes, it should have hurt. Maybe a few years ago, it would have destroyed me to hear that. But now, it just confirmed what I had already known. That's all I needed to hear, I said. Then I turned to leave. I didn't look back as I walked out the door. Liza was waiting for me in the car, eyes scanning my face like she was trying to figure out how I was feeling. You okay? She asked softly. I thought about it. About the years I had spent wondering why my parents didn't love me the way they loved Sam. About the nights I had spent feeling like I wasn't enough, like there had to be something wrong with me. Then I thought about everything I had built for myself without them, and I realized I was okay. Better than okay. I got into the car, letting out a slow breath. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Liza smiled. Good. Now let's go home. And with that, I left my past behind. For good. A week passed, and I thought that was the end of it. Sam was gone. My parents had finally faced the truth, and I had walked away without looking back. But of course, she wasn't done with me yet. It started with a text. I had no idea how Sam got my number, but there it was, lighting up my phone like some bad omen. Sam, you ruined my life. I hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone and tossing it onto the table. Liza glanced up from her laptop. Let me guess. Your sister? Yup. What does she want? To make me feel guilty. I leaned back against the couch, exhaling sharply. She still thinks I'm the bad guy, Liza scoffed. Of course she does. People like her never think they're in the wrong. I knew she was right, but still, some small part of me had hoped that maybe, just maybe, Sam would realize what she had done, that she'd take a second to reflect and understand that she had brought this on herself. Instead, she was doing what she had always done, playing the victim. I ignored her text. Then the calls started. Blocked one number, she'd use another. Blocked that one, she'd have a friend call me instead. She wasn't even saying anything new, just repeating the same nonsense over and over again. That she had made a mistake, that I had gone too far, that I needed to fix this. Fix what, exactly? The mess she created, the life she destroyed, I wasn't falling for it. So I did the only thing I could. I warned her once, told her to stop, to leave me alone, to move on. She didn't listen, so I threatened to call the cops. And that, finally, got her to back off. At least, for now. My parents tried to reach out next. They hadn't contacted me directly after I left their house that day, but I knew it was only a matter of time. People like them, people who had spent years believing one thing, didn't just suddenly change overnight. It started small. A Facebook friend request from my mom, a comment from my dad under Liza's engagement post, "Congratulations. Hope you're doing well." Then came the message, "Dad, your mother and I would like to talk." I stared at those 7 words for a long time, feeling nothing. 7 years ago, I would have jumped at the chance to talk to them. I would have given anything to hear those words. Now, I didn't care. Liza was sitting beside me on the couch, flipping through a wedding magazine. "They finally reached out?" "Yeah." "You gonna reply?" I thought about it. Then, without another word, I deleted the message. Some things weren't worth reopening. Some bridges deserved to stay burned. A few more months passed, and for the first time in a long time, life actually felt normal. No more family drama. No more late-night thoughts about what could have been. No more anger, regret, or resentment dragging me down. I was just living. Liza and I threw ourselves into wedding planning. It wasn't easy, especially with work and life constantly getting in the way, but we were making it happen. One night, as we sat on the couch surrounded by invitations and cake samples, Liza suddenly turned to me. "Are you sure you don't want to invite them?" she asked carefully. I knew exactly who she meant. I shook my head. "Nope." She nodded like she expected that answer, then leaned against my shoulder. "Good, because they don't deserve to be there." She was right. My wedding was going to be a day filled with love, happiness, and real family, not the people who had abandoned me the first chance they got. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was just done. The wedding came and went. It was perfect, small, intimate, filled with people who actually cared about us. I never once thought about my parents that day. Not once. But they clearly thought about me. A few weeks later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew exactly who it was from the second I saw my mother's handwriting. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Instead, I tossed it into the trash, shut the lid, and walked back inside to my wife, the only family I needed. Because for the first time in my life, I was truly, finally free. Story 2, my name is Rachel, and I am a 45-year-old dentist who runs a prosperous practice. I made a choice 10 years ago that would permanently alter my life. James, the lovely guy I married, had a daughter from his previous marriage who was 12 years old. After the wedding, it made sense for them to come in with me because I had a large apartment with many bedrooms. Emma, my stepdaughter, made it perfectly plain from day one that she wasn't thrilled about her father's choice. "Dad," she'd say right in front of me, "could you tell your wife I'm not hungry?" The way she emphasized your wife felt like a slap in the face, each and every time. It was a battleground for the first few months. Emma would disregard me, smash doors, and have tantrums that would turn heads in the neighborhood. However, I declined to fall for the ruse. Instead of punishing her or fighting back, I chose a different approach. One evening, after another one of her rants, I knocked on her door. "Emma," I replied through the door, "I'm not here to take your mother's place. I'm simply hoping we can find our own way to get along." That night, she didn't answer, but after that talk, something shifted. I began to treat her as an adult rather than as a child who required supervision or discipline. If she chose to talk to her father about something instead of me, I would calmly and logically react to her snarky remarks. That was fine, too. One morning, she commented, "Dad, Rachel's pancakes do smell good." She had never before pointed out anything admirable about me, even if it wasn't stated to my face. Things began to change 2 years after the wedding. The adjustment wasn't significant. More like I slowly dissolving. Emma started talking to me directly. Little requests came first, followed by real talks. In everything I did, I made sure to involve her. Weekend excursions, family getaways, and even goofy movie evenings at home. Rachel. One day, without resentment, she inquired using my name for the first time. This summer, is it possible for me to join you and Dad at the beach house? The largest improvement, in my opinion, occurred following Emma's mother, Linda's second marriage, have her own private life to attend to. Linda stopped saying those insignificant things that would make Emma hate me. The phone calls that used to conclude with Emma in tears grew shorter and more informal. One evening when we were preparing supper together, Emma informed me, "Mom is different now. She seemed to be happier. I suppose everyone is entitled to a second chance at happiness." I gladly took those remarks, which felt like a sacrifice for peace. I became aware that we were at last approaching the status of a true family as I watched her mix the spaghetti sauce, a recipe we had learned together. I immediately offered to help with Emma's tuition once she was accepted to college. Since James and I had already talked about it, it seemed like the right thing to do. We had gone a long way from the early days of quiet treatments and slammed doors, after all. We sat on her bed the night before daughter departed for college, surrounded by heaps of clothing and partially packed boxes. I needed to tell her something vital. I said, "Listen, Emma, that downtown marketing agency is headed by my brother David. If you're interested, I can assist you find a job there when you graduate. This is an excellent location to begin your career." She gave me a hug, then a really tight one. It wasn't one of our uncomfortable side embraces. "Really? That would be incredible. Rachel, thank you." We didn't get to see her as much as we would have liked when she was in college. She would occasionally spend weekends and vacations at home, but that's typical of college students. I made sure to prepare all of her favorite dishes when she came to visit. She eventually acknowledged that my lasagna was superior to her mother's. When she thought I wasn't looking, she would steal those chocolate chip cookies out of the kitchen. "How is the program for business management going?" Over dinner, I'd inquire. Professor Turner's lesson is still enjoyable. She would become excited while discussing her coursework, internships, and future goals. She had occasionally suggested going to see her mother in the middle of a conversation. "I dropped by Mom's apartment last weekend." Then quickly add, she would remark, "Oh, but I'm working on a project for my marketing class that you should see." When she shifted the topic like that, I never pressed. Why would I? Spending time with her mother came naturally to her. James concurred as well. During these encounters, we had found a comfortable routine. Emma would share information with us about her peers, school, and part-time work at the campus coffee shop. I would prepare her favorite meals, and we would all gather around the dining table like before, laughing and telling stories. "My roommate can't believe how lucky I am to have such a cool stepmom," Emma stated during one of these dinners. She often gripes about hers. She probably had no idea how much those comments meant to me. It was like winning an Olympic gold to hear her call me cool after all those years of hardship. I could tell James was thinking the same thing when he clasped my hand beneath the table. Emma stayed in the kitchen longer than normal one evening as we were cleaning up after supper. She fidgeted with a dish towel and muttered, "Rachel, I appreciate everything. You know everything, not just about college. Time tends to catch you off guard. You're helping your stepdaughter move into her college residence hall one day, and the next you know it, she's getting her diploma while wearing a cap and gown." I kept thinking about the apartment key in my handbag, waiting to transform Emma's life. As I watched her cross the stage, my grandma had owned the flat. It wasn't very big. It was a comfortable two-bedroom apartment in a good area, but it was ideal for a young professional just starting out. Although I had been renting it out for years, my ideas for it had changed. From the back seat, Emma was talking animatedly about her friends' intentions after graduation. Mike got the job in Boston, and Sarah is heading to Chicago. The fact that people are dispersing around the nation is strange. I grinned as I met James's gaze. She was unaware that she wouldn't need to travel. I was so excited when we arrived home that I was hardly able to control myself. I had the entire apartment professionally cleaned and painted after asking the previous renters to go a month ago. As we sat down in our living room, I added, "Everything was ready, Emma. For you, I have something." I extracted the keys from a tiny silver keychain with her initials, my hands trembling a little. "What is this?" she questioned, looking perplexed as she took the keys. "A flat?" "My grandmother's old place," I answered simply. "Now it's yours." There was utter silence in the room. Emma's gaze shifted from the keys in her hand to me and back again. James's jaw had fallen agape. "Are you serious?" Emma hardly raised her voice beyond a whisper. Very serious. Now that you are beginning your job, you will require your own space. A family, perhaps. One day? I showed her the photos on my phone. It is located at 542 Cedar Street. You can move in whenever you'd like because everything is prepared. I started crying. Like she used to do when she was younger. She pushed herself against me and put her arms around my neck. This is unbelievable, Rachel. Thank you. Next came James, who drew me into a close hug. I cherish you. In my ear, he murmured, you are aware of how wonderful you are. Emma had already reached for her jacket. Could I go see it now? I made sure she had the address correct and giggled as I gave it to her again. Naturally, the keys are compatible with both the apartment door and the building entry. Explore at your own pace, she said. I think I'll stay there tonight. Is that acceptable? I want to feel at home in my new place. James and I snuggled up on the couch after she departed. Without her busy bustle, the home felt strangely quiet. With my head resting on his shoulder, I whispered, just think, I will meet someone wonderful one day, and they will make that location their first home. James gave my head a kiss. When we become grandparents, you will pamper our grandchildren in the same way that you have spoiled our daughter. Our daughter. My heart grew as I heard those words. She had truly become my daughter in every manner that counted after all these years, all the hardships, the tears, the slowness, and the trust. When my front door exploded open with a noise that made me jump, I was still enjoying my day off and feeling the warmth of yesterday's excitement. Emma's mother, Linda, swept in like a cyclone. You dare? She let out a scream, her face twisted in anger. Who are you, in your opinion? My heart was racing when I got up from the couch. Linda? What's the matter? Don't pretend I'm innocent. I heard about your small present from Emma. A whole apartment. Really? The words were almost coming out of her mouth. Do you believe you can purchase my daughter's affection? The charge struck me like a punch to the body. This has nothing to do with it. I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. My grandma left me that flat. Oh, how practical. I was interrupted by Linda. Like an animal in a cage, pacing our living area. Knowing full well that I could never match such a costly present, you had no choice but to offer my daughter the extra apartment you happen to have sitting around. Please, Linda. I tried to clarify. I made a conciliatory motion with my hands. Emma is someone I adore. To me, she resembles a daughter. All I wanted to do was assist her in beginning her adult life. Love her. Linda laughed bitterly and harshly. Since day one, you've been attempting to take my position. The expensive trips came first, followed by funding her college education. And now, this. She took a step in my direction. I took an automatic step back when she lifted her hand. James suddenly showed there and grabbed Linda's wrist before anything could happen. That's sufficient. He spoke firmly. You must go now. Linda pulled off her arm. Hatred blazed in her eyes. Rachel, this isn't over. You believe you're so generous, so flawless. Well, a mother's love cannot be purchased. Emma will never be your daughter. She will always be mine, regardless of how many flats you give her. With enough power to rattle the panes, the door slammed behind her. My entire body shook as I stood still. James attempted to entice me into an uncomfortable embrace, but I was unable to unwind into it. My thoughts were racing, repeatedly repeating what Linda had said. All these years, had I really been trying to buy Emma's love? Did everyone think that? She is mistaken. James spoke quietly, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. You're aware that she's mistaken? I gave a robotic nod, but on the inside, I felt like everything had begun to fall apart. 10 years of fostering trust, cautious progress, and sporadic reversals, all of which were boiled down to charges of manipulation and bribery. The following morning, Emma appeared as though she had not slept. As I was brewing coffee, she padded into the kitchen, hardly looking into my eyes. Emma, I started yesterday or so. I'd rather not discuss it. Without saying another word, she interrupted me with a flat voice. She disappeared into her former room. As I stood in the kitchen holding a coffee pot, I heard her door close. In some way, the sound was final, like the fall of a judge's gavel. I could hear her fingers tapping on her phone screen all day long, most likely sending a text. Mom. By the time Emma came out for dinner, I figured the silence had become worse. With her phone still firmly grasped in her left hand, she pushed her food around her plate before abruptly declaring, "Next weekend, I'm hosting a graduation celebration at La Mason." I felt a wave of relief. At last, an opportunity to get over this embarrassment. "That's fantastic. I can assist you with all of your planning." "We can, but La Maison is costly." "No," Emma interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "My real mother is paying for it." The way she emphasized real made my stomach clench. Not just mom or mother, but real mother. Like she was deliberately drawing the line between us. Later that night, I told James about the conversation. The way she said real mother, it seemed like she was trying to hurt me. "You're reading too much into this," he remarked, rubbing my palm absently. "She's just anxious about everything that's happened." You know how Linda can become. But I wasn't reading too much into it. I couldn't be over the following few days. I'd arrive home from work to hear Emma's voice floating down the hallway, enthusiastically contacting friends and family. "The party's going to be spectacular," she'd gush. "Mom's leased out the whole restaurant. Yes, the nice French one downtown." I'd stand in the hallway, key still in hand, listening to her create plan after plan. She made calls to several of our neighbors, her college pals, and her relatives. But I didn't receive an invitation day after day. It seemed like another brick was being placed in the wall between us every time I heard her on the phone or every new person she invited. A wall that I didn't anticipate until it was nearly finished. I heard her speaking in passionate, hushed tones to someone one evening, most likely her mother. "Everything is set up. The guest list, the decor, and the cuisine." Something the other person said made her giggle, and the sound twisted like a dagger in my chest. She used to giggle like that with me when we stayed up late cooking or watching movies. After being tortured for 2 days, I made the decision that I could stand it no longer. The following morning, I discovered her in the kitchen, sipping coffee and browsing through her phone as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't been methodically asking everyone to her graduation celebration. Except for me, Emma. I didn't want to sound shaky when I spoke. "Can we discuss the party?" "I have yet to hear any specifics." "When should we do this?" "You won't be coming?" Still without looking up, she interrupted me. "What?" The word was hardly audible above a whisper. She did glance up now, and I could hardly recognize her face. Her lips was contorted in a grin I had never seen before, and her eyes were frigid. "I heard you. You're not welcome." I steadied myself by holding on to the kitchen counter. "What's going on, Emma? Is this a result of the recent events involving your mother?" With a weapon-like emphasis on each syllable, she corrected. "My real mother. She does not want you there, to be sure." "I don't either. I don't get it." I took out a chair and sat down. My legs were weak all of a sudden. "If the flat is at issue," I recoiled at the unpleasant chuckle she gave. "Oh, the flat will remain with me. Who, after all, refuses a free place to live? Think of it as payment. I've endured you and your ideal stepmother for all the years. Take action." It seemed like the room was spinning. "Emma, put up with me. What are you discussing? Have you been in pain for a long time? You truly don't understand, do you, God?" With a shriek on the tile floor, she pushed her chair back and got to her feet. "You were never loved by me. You were the one who ensured my parents would never be able to reconcile. They could have arranged things if you hadn't arrived. We had the chance to be a true family once more." Every statement was like a punch to the body. I reflected on the many late evenings I had spent assisting her with her schoolwork. I'd held her through all the times she sobbed over boys. Every mother-daughter moment I believed we had together. Actual family. My voice broke. "What do you suppose we've become over the last decade? The college fees, all those trips we made together?" "Yes," splurging. "Isn't that your answer to everything?" She scowled, and her face looked so strange with that attitude. Expensive presents, lavish vacations, educational expenses, and now an apartment. Did you believe you could just purchase a daughter for yourself? My intention was not to do that. Tears were beginning to well up, but I blinked them away. "I adore you, which is why I did those things. Since I believed that we were related. Family?" She chuckled once more. That dreadful, derisive chuckle. "My mother is my family. My dad is my family. You? You are just the lady who entered the picture and wrecked everything. And now you're attempting to purchase an apartment for my sweetheart. After all those years, I felt like I was out of breath. Did any of it happen? Sunday at 7 o'clock is the party time. Rather of responding, she remarked, as she made her way to her room. Don't come. You're not welcome. The wall was covered with pictures of us at her high school graduation, Christmas, and the beach moments I cherished, but suddenly seemed like intricate lies, and the door banged so forcefully. I couldn't force myself to empty the mug of coffee, even though it had long since gone cold. It seemed as if I were discarding the last decade of my life. I waited for James to get home that night. My hands were trembling as I practiced telling him about Emma's hurtful remarks. When he eventually entered the room, between sobbing, the narrative came out. I had no control. Without removing his coat, he went straight to Emma's room and stated, I'll talk to her. I waited in the kitchen with my hands encircling a chilly cup of coffee. When James eventually came out, the minutes had passed like hours. I eagerly looked up in the hopes of finding assistance and comprehending anything that could ease this nightmare. Rachel. My heart fell before he had even finished speaking because he refused to look into my eyes. Emma makes some good points. Perhaps it would be best if he did not attend the celebration. That's when the world stopped spinning. After 10 years of marriage, everything became crystal clear. All along, I had been living a lie. Are you still going? My voice sounded remote, strange, as if it were someone else's. Naturally, she is my daughter. As if it were the most apparent thing in the world, he said it. As if asking was foolish of me. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded. I pretended to be the ideal, forgiving wife for the next few days. At breakfast, I grinned. I prepared their favorite meals. I acted as if nothing was wrong, but every hour my heart broke into tiny fragments. Sunday night. As soon as their car vanished around the corner, I watched them head out to the party. I immediately took action. At my grandmother's apartment, the locksmith was already there. Without questioning why I needed the locks changed so badly, he worked swiftly and effectively. I had new keys within 20 minutes. I moved like a possessed woman when I got home. James's clothing was placed in suitcases according to type and season. It was exactly like how I always packed for trips. By the door, everything was neatly stacked. I was prepared for him to leave my life. I next prepared a cup of chamomile tea, which has been my go-to comfort beverage since I was a kid. I sat down on the couch and opened Instagram while the kitchen filled with the comforting scent. I knew so well, Emma had already shared pictures from the celebration. She was positioned between James and Linda, and they were all grinning at the camera as if nothing were wrong. Blessed to be celebrating with the people who truly matter, the caption said. At midnight, I heard James's key in the door, his footsteps in the corridor, then quiet when he entered the bedroom and saw the baggage. Rachel. His voice was harsh with bewilderment. What's all this? I took another drink of my already chilly tea. You need to locate somewhere else to live. He chuckled. Actually laughed like this was all some dumb joke. Don't you think you're overreacting? It was simply a party. Only a gathering? With caution, I placed my cup on the coffee table, the porcelain clinking softly. I was not allowed to attend a family celebration with my husband and stepdaughter. When she said she had never loved me, you stood by her side. You did nothing as you watched her treat me like trash. Now my voice was steady. Sure. Divorce papers should arrive this week. He choked back the chuckle. Now give it a minute. This is something we can resolve. What should be fixed? I cut you off. Because you never showed me affection. That I was only your daughter's easy substitute mommy. That you watched as she flung back 10 years of love at me. The front door slammed open before James could react. With wrinkles and mascara running down her cheeks, Emma strode in her party dress. What did you do? She let out a scream. Why am I unable to enter my apartment? I steadied my fingers and took another sip of chamomile tea. Your flat? You mean the flat where my grandma lives? I got it from you. It cannot just be taken back. I can, in fact. I put my cup down. Because you think it was only a bribe to win your affection. I'm retracting it. I'm not a briber. This is not possible. Anger and terror splintered her voice. I did, and I can. In the meanwhile, I gave my brother a call this morning. Don't waste your time applying to his firm for that job. You are no longer a member of the family, I informed him. Emma's face fell flat. It's really harsh. How can you treat me like this? Cruel? Slowly, I got to my feet. Cruel has been feigning love for 10 years. Cruelty is accepting all they provide you while harboring a deep hatred for them. Posting pictures of your real family and keeping them out of your graduation celebration is cruel. At last, James was able to speak. You're being irrational, Rachel. I'm being clear, though. It was the first time in a decade. I looked at both of them. I live in this flat. My family no longer includes you. Now I want you both gone. Emma cried uncontrollably and rushed to her room. She was weeping and swearing as she packed, and I could hear her slamming closet and doors. I turned up the kitchen faucet to block out James's voice as he continued to attempt to speak. Emma came out with her bags half an hour later. She was angry, and her face was crimson. She spat. You're a terrible person. You're worse than I imagined. I despise you. Calmly, I said. Goodbye, Emma. Remember to keep your golf clubs in the garage, James. A last click closed the door behind them as they walked out. For what seemed like the first time in days, I stood in my quiet apartment and took deep breaths. My phone was overflowing with texts the next morning. Before turning to messages, Linda made 17 calls, each one more angry than the last. You have no right to reclaim the flat, you cunning witch! This is where I'll see you. James's communications were different. They were apologies and pleas. Talk to me, please. We can resolve this. I apologize for everything. Emma experimented with both methods. I said something I didn't mean. My life is being ruined by you. Rachel, please. I apologize. I ignored them and blocked them all. It had finally come to light after 10 years of deceit and deception. They had taken advantage of me for my money, my apartment, and my contacts. Okay, not anymore. The divorce process moved quickly. We are grateful for our prenuptial agreement. James argued about his contributions to the marriage and attempted to take half of my assets. When I showed his lawyer the prenuptial agreement James had signed 10 years prior through mutual acquaintances, his lawyer's face plummeted. They reportedly located a modest two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Emma was having trouble finding a job without my brother's assistance. In order to pay the security deposit, James had to sell his membership at the golf club. Now the apartment feels larger, less full. However, it belongs to me. I brew my chamomile tea every morning and watch the sunrise from the window. No more preparing lavish meals for unappreciative relatives. No more footing the bill for someone else's ideal dinner. More acting. Story 3. I made Dad regret it when he tried to give my house to my pampered sister after learning about my pay. Hello, everyone! Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. For obvious reasons, throw away. Reddit, hello. I've spent the last hour or so attempting to create this post. Continue erasing and beginning again. However, this is consuming me, so I need to get it off my chest. This whole affair began when I was 15 years old, and I am currently a 31-year-old man working as a real estate developer. When I was 4, my real mother passed away from cancer. When I became 7 years old, this woman was married to Dad, who was 42 years old at the time. Since that's her true name, I'll refer to her as Beth, a 35-year-old woman. At first glance, she appeared to be pleasant. Did you know about the whole trying too hard stepmom thing? However, once Mom gave birth to Jenny, my half-sister, everything changed. Sad was really cruel to me when I was a child. Very extravagant. Tight. For him, nothing I ever accomplished was sufficient. I can still clearly recall passing this extremely challenging chemistry test with a B+. Rather of expressing joy, he simply gazed at me and said, "Why wasn't this an A on the basketball team? Why don't you start that kind of stuff all the time?" he would ask. But it's a very other scenario with Jenny. They would say, "Oh, honey, it's okay, even if she failed an exam. You gave it your all." While I was there, Beth made sure Jenny was treated like a princess, the one that consistently messed up everything. In retrospect, I'm very certain that I had ADHD or a condition that was never identified. I couldn't sit still in class, for example. have a hard time concentrating on that type of thing. However, Dad would yell at me rather than attempting to diagnose the issue. Why can't you just be normal? Was his favorite thing to say. Similar to your sister? Beth, meanwhile, stood there nodding as if I were a problem that needed to be solved. Dad put in a tremendous amount of overtime at his construction firm. He was therefore rarely at home. Beth would truly come into her own at that point. I would have to prepare a sandwich for myself since she would forget to prepare enough food for supper, or she would intentionally wash my garments incorrectly, causing them to deteriorate or shrink. I couldn't truly prove little things. Do you understand? Dad would just claim I was causing problems again if I attempted to inform him, because Beth had led him to believe so. The mental tricks she performed were the worst. She would rearrange my belongings and accuse me of being careless, and if something broke, it was always my fault. Why would Beth lie about it? So Dad took everything at face value. He was totally enamored by her finger. Then came the day that made all the difference. I was taking my customary detour via Wilson Park on my way home from school. I spotted Beth and this man at the old gazebo at that point. I initially assumed it could have been a friend or something, but then I noticed them sharing a kiss. And not simply a kiss, if you get what I mean. I wasn't sure whether I recognized the man to Mark, but I believe Beth spotted me fleeing. His name was, I believe. On occasion, he would attend these charity gatherings at our home. It was said that Beth was running a super buff guy, always dressed in elegant outfits. He appeared to live at the gym. I didn't know what to do, informed Dad. Yes, exactly. As if he would trust me. For years, Beth had made sure my father believed I was merely a troublemaker. In addition, Dad was completely smitten with Jenny, who was 8 years old at the time. He would most likely believe that I was only envious or attempting to make trouble. So I didn't say anything. I tried to block out what I had seen. However, after that, I began to see things that I couldn't ignore. For example, no one else in the family had Jenny's strange reddish-brown hair. Dad was often preoccupied, so he never noticed. I heard Beth talking on the phone one evening when I got up to grab some water. I was going to enter the kitchen, but I halted as soon as I heard her tone. I caught enough of her whispering to make my stomach turn. Mark, you don't get it. He's becoming aware. At first, I didn't know who she was referring to, but then she did. He believes that she is his. But the reality is known to both of us. It was as though the room's air had been drawn out. I knew who she was referring to. Jenny. Her father wasn't my dad. Mark was. I must have made a sound because Beth fell silent. Then she criticized all of the phony sweetness. You shouldn't be up this late, honey. Before she could see me, I ran back to my room. I felt I could be ill since my heart was beating so rapidly. I knew now, but I had no proof. I was aware of the reality, and I was certain that Beth would stop at nothing to prevent me from informing my father. But Beth must have realized I knew something. She began observing me intently, particularly in Jenny's presence. It was impossible for me to pass Jenny's room without Beth suddenly showing up and asking me what I was doing. She began to inform her father that I was behaving strangely with Jenny. The first understand now. Dad was suspicious of me since she was hinting at something. I recalled this one instance. Jenny needed help with her multiplication table, so I was tutoring her. You know, basic arithmetic stuff. After essentially yanking Jenny away and promising to help instead, Beth told Dad that I was becoming too close to Jenny. Her voice is still in my ears, man. The thought of that makes me ill. For about 2 weeks, that was the way it was. Beth, observing all of my actions. When she believed I couldn't hear, she whispered things to my father. At supper, Dad started staring at me strangely. I made every effort to avoid being in the home, but that just made matters worse. Dad was advised by Beth that I was most likely doing drugs or something, and no one even inquired about my well-being. I was so worried out that no one seemed to care that my grades were suffering. Dad just became really mad with me. I saw Beth and Mark in the park approximately 2 weeks later, and that day I returned home from school as usual. When I first came in, something seemed off. Before I even opened the door, I could hear Beth sobbing, and 2 police cars were parked outside our house, like that very phony sobbing that people use to attract attention. When I come in, I see Beth sobbing uncontrollably on the couch, while 2 police officers sit across from her. Dad appears to be preparing to kill someone as he stands in the corner. Jenny has vanished from view. When I enter, everyone glances at me and stops chatting. A police officer gets up and asks if we may speak, while the other officer remains with Beth and Dad. They lead me to the kitchen. At that point, they inform me that Jenny and Beth informed them that I had been inappropriately touching Jenny. At first, I was unable to even comprehend what they were saying, as if my brain had simply stopped working. What? I asked repeatedly. No, that didn't repeatedly occur. However, they persisted in their terrible inquiries. I touched her where? How many times did I tell her not to talk? I was on the verge of vomiting. Beth was still acting like she was sobbing, and I could hear her muttering things like, I should have known. I noticed the indicators. There was nothing from Dad. His hands were clenched as he stood there. I was asked whether I wanted to provide a statement by the police. I witnessed Beth cheating on her father, so I told them she was lying and attempting to get rid of me. A huge error. They didn't think I was real. When Dad heard me say it, he went utterly crazy. Began yelling that I was envious of Jenny and was attempting to destroy his marriage. Called me all the names you can imagine. Said that I required assistance because I was mentally ill. The police were unable to locate any concrete proof, since nothing ever occurred, of course. In addition, I was just 15 at the time. However, the harm had already been done. After hurling a trash bag at me, Dad gave me 10 minutes to gather my belongings and go. Said he would murder me himself if I ever got close to Jenny again. He practically grabbed me by my shirt and pushed me toward the stairs as I tried to tell him about Beth and Mark one last time. He was more irate than I had ever seen him. I was the only one who noticed Beth's little grin as she stood there. My dad said that everything in the home belonged to him because he paid for it, so I took whatever clothes I could put in the bag and tried to slip my Game Boy into my school backpack. I could hear Beth below all the while I was up there, probably to keep Dad from becoming upset when I returned. Jenny was present. She seemed perplexed, as if she didn't comprehend what was going on. Beth was shielding her from me with her arms wrapped around her. The thing that kills me the most is that what Jenny's expression was. She was only a child. Beth got rid of me by using her own kid. I was told to relinquish my residence to my father. He said that I was no longer his son. Beth remarked, perhaps someday you'll get the help you need, while pulling a false, sorrowful expression. The fact that she was lying made me want to yell, that she was in need of assistance. However, what was the purpose? I knew they wouldn't believe me. They watched me go, most likely to make sure I went. I took one look back. Jenny and Beth were being held by Dad, and Beth continued to pretend to cry. Dad assuring Jenny she was safe now was the last thing I heard. That night, with around $40 in my wallet and no idea what to do, I wandered about for hours. Beth had already informed all of my friends' parents that I was a predator, so I was unable to visit any of their homes. She had meticulously planned the entire event. I discovered an abandoned building where a homeless man resided. That first night, they allowed me to crash there. I spent the following few months living there, no longer able to attend school. Of course, since I was just 15, I was unable to obtain a legitimate employment. I did certain things for food that I'm not proud of. The worst thing? Beth made sure her side of the story was heard by everyone in town. It was impossible for me to go any place without getting these glances. Lost. Even my once likable teachers stopped talking to me, as did all of my friends. I simply lost my entire existence. I ultimately had to leave town because of this. I ended up staying in the aforementioned abandoned building for almost 6 months. This ancient storehouse was close to the railroad tracks. About 5 or 6 other males also lived there. In reality, the most of them were good individuals who simply had unfortunate luck. Tom, an older man, took me under his wing, you know. After his wife passed away and he lost his job, he had been homeless for years. He showed me where to acquire food, for example. Where would you be able to use the restroom? Wintertime tips for staying warm. I never imagined that I would need to grasp basic survival skills. I kept hoping that my father would change his mind, see the reality, and come retrieve me. However, he never did. He was simply unconcerned. I applied for employment, but no one seemed interested in hiring me. Beth had ensured that everyone in our tiny community was aware of her version of events. I was rejected by McDonald's as well. At the grocery store, I was the person who everyone spoke about in whispers. If parents saw me approaching, they would practically drag their children away. To make ends meet, I started engaging in some dubious activities. Not violent, however. Yes, I don't feel proud of that period of my life. Tom said that I should move out of town and start again somewhere else. But, I was afraid. I was only a child. Really? What was I meant to do? Then these police officers arrived at the warehouse one evening. We had been reported for trespassing by someone. We were given 10 minutes to go. That night, I lost the majority of my belongings. Anyhow, what little I had left, I walked to the next town over with Tom. Lasted the entire night. We arrived at this eatery at a truck stop. I was keeping track of my finances. I had around $27 left. Tom informs me that he may have a relative in the city who may help. Said that his relative owes him a favor and runs a few eateries. It was around 200 kilometers from the city. What else could I do, though? Tom encouraged me to get away while I could, and he handed me the final $40 and his cousin's address. Said I still had a shot, but he was too old to start afresh. After that, I never saw Tom again. I wonder what happened to him sometimes. To go to the city, I rode a Greyhound. I slept in the bus terminal throughout my first week. I finally located Dave, Tom's cousin. He wasn't at all what I had anticipated. Very well-groomed man. Oversaw, say, 3 distinct eateries. He hired me to do the dishwashing at this upscale Italian establishment. The initial months were difficult. In the restaurant storage area, I was dozing off. After hours, Dave allowed me to crash there. I saved as much money as I could. I finally saved up enough money to rent this small room in a really undesirable area of town. Hey, though, it was mine. I began studying as much as I could about the restaurant industry, went from dishwashing to prep cooking, and finally to line cooking. The head chef began teaching me about food costs, inventories, and other related topics after noticing that I was strong with numbers. Amy was a frequent patron of the eatery. About twice a week, she would visit with her mother. After I started working as a waiter, I always sat in my area. She was a business student at college, or something. When it wasn't too hectic, we would converse. For the first time in many years, she didn't treat me like trash. What she stated that first night is precisely what I recall. "What's good here, hey?" She looked at me rather than the menu when she inquired. "The carbonara is really delicious. The sauce is homemade by Marco." The first probably sounded foolish when I stated that. "Do you really know who prepares the meals?" She grinned. "Most of the sites I visit. After reading the specials, the servers simply vanish." We ended up discussing food for approximately 5 minutes. Her mother simply sat there grinning. "Amy, please quit pestering the poor waiter," her mother told me later. "He has additional tables." Amy chuckled as she surveyed the deserted eatery. "Yes, mother. He's obviously overloaded." They began to visit more frequently and consistently asked for my part. Amy occasionally brought her homework from her studies in business at the nearby college. She was having trouble with some accounting-related tasks one evening. She looked over her textbook and moaned, "This is absurd! How can a business turn a profit even when it has lost money?" "Imaginative bookkeeping," I remarked as I gave her more water. "To make it appear favorable to investors, they are most likely manipulating the figures." She gave me the impression that I had changed my mind. "What knowledge do you possess regarding corporate accounting?" Actually, I had been in the library reading business literature. I was curious in how restaurants operated. One day, I could open my own. She became really delighted when I told her this. "That's incredible. The majority of individuals our age don't give a damn about this. Would you want to examine this issue with me?" The next thing I know, I'm assisting her with her schoolwork while taking a break at her table. Her mother would only observe us while grinning knowingly. This continued for months. I would try not to fall in love with Amy when she came in, and we would discuss business matters. Utterly failed at that point. Despite her intelligence, she never made me feel foolish. Similar to this one instance. She said, "I don't understand why you're working here. You're obviously skilled at these business-related stuff. College is out of reach for some people." I muttered in embarrassment. "College is not necessary for success," she remarked. "My dad, who now runs 3 businesses, never went. Experience, he believes, is more important than degrees." I still remember the talk. I began to consider my options outside of working in restaurants. On my days off, I studied at the library until I earned my JED. Amy assisted me with the mathematical portions. I never told her that I was afraid she would quit talking to me if she found out, and she never inquired about my background. For around 5 years, it was my life. Get up, work art research, go to sleep, do it again. Didn't go on a date. Failed to form a friendship. Really? Just concerned about getting by and attempting to improve. I kept thinking about Jenny the entire time, praying that Beth wasn't causing her any problems. Unfortunately, Amy showed up one evening looking quite excited. You know what? Dad is trying to find someone to assist him in overseeing his new real estate development project. Entry-level job with plenty of opportunity for advancement. You ought to submit an application. Amy, I froze. I never even completed my high school education. You earned your GED, though? That's the only important thing. Try it, please. What could possibly go wrong? The worst possible outcome. She might learn about anything, even Beth's falsehoods and my background. Amy persisted, though. Please. For me, Father, have faith in my judgment, and I have no doubt that you would excel at this. I had to borrow a suit from Dave in order to apply, still in good shape. It was a scary interview. Before saying anything, Amy's father just looked at me for a minute or so. You understand business, Amy says. Show it. Oh, he said. I was able to effectively discuss real estate development trends that I had read about, and even offered some suggestions for his next project. He just nodded and stated, You start Monday at the end. I informed Amy that I had been hired. She gave me a hug. It was the first embrace I had received in years. I nearly burst into tears at the restaurant. See, she said, you can do it, I told you. Everything changed because of the job. Her father started to resemble the parent I wish I had. When I had suggestions, he genuinely paid attention, taught me all there is to know about developing real estate. I was overseeing my own projects within a year. Amy and I grew closer during. After work, we would have coffee and chat for hours. I didn't ask her out, though. I couldn't stop thinking about my background and Beth's falsehoods. Amy was worthy of better than any homeless man. The night that altered everything then arrived. We were working on a project proposal late at night. It's just the two of us in the workplace. Amy added abruptly, You know, you're really dumb about some things for someone who knows so much about business. What are you saying? She gave me a direct glance. I've been waiting for you to ask me out for the past 2 years. I sat there looking foolish. I'm not good enough for you, Amy, I finally said. There are aspects of me that you are unaware of. Give me a try. So, she said, all I told her about Beth was that, regarding the falsehoods about homelessness. Waited for her to display fear or contempt. Rather, she broke down in tears. Then she became enraged. Not at me, at my dad and Beth. Those awful people, she remarked. How could they harm their own son in that way? She then gave me a kiss. Just kissed me from the other side of the desk. Yes, that's how Amy and I ended up meeting. But when you least expect it, life has a way of bringing back the past. After we began dating, Amy and I were married really quickly. Her family was fantastic. In fact, they were like sons to me. We purchased this lovely 5-bedroom home in a desirable area and had our first child, a boy. Everything in life was ideal. Then, around 3 months ago, I came upon this friend request while perusing Facebook at work. My dad appears much older in my profile picture than I recall. Like a fool, I simply sat there looking at my phone. As soon as Amy arrived home, she realized something was off. In our kitchen, I was sitting there looking at nothing. Sweetheart, what's the matter? As she placed our kid to sleep, she inquired. Dad came upon me on Facebook. He gave me a friend request, I said. She took a seat next to me. How will you respond? I have no idea. I have yet to open his mail. Would you like me to read it first? I gave my phone to her. She read the note aloud as soon as she opened it. I realize it's been a while, son. As I become older, I've been reflecting a lot on the past. I can't go a day without thinking of you, Beth. I also wish to put things right. Jenny's big brother is missed. Give us an opportunity to clarify, please. Dad, love. I chuckled, but not in a joyful way. Jenny is missing me. I doubt that she even remembers me. When it all happened, she was 8 years old. Amy gave me a hand squeeze. I did, but you don't have to answer. I wanted to know why, but maybe I'm a fool. Now, 16 years later, I replied to the message after accepting the request. Why now? He responded quickly. I am now 58, experienced a few health scares, made me understand that life is too short to harbor resentment. It would mean a lot to have you at Jenny's upcoming wedding. For a few weeks, we exchanged messages. I learned that Jenny is 24 years old, employed in marketing, and engaged to a lawyer. Beth's still the same, according to Dad. Yes, she is. Amy constantly warning me to exercise caution. She said that people don't really change all that much. However, I wanted to think that Dad had changed. Isn't that stupid? They requested to come. Amy stated that although it was up to me, she would back my decision. I said, yes. A huge error. They arrived up on a Saturday morning. Dad seemed elderly, as in very ancient gray hair, has a minor limp when walking. In fact, Beth looked precisely the same. That phony grin was still there. Jenny was now an adult. I was the only one who appeared to realize that I looked even more like Mark. The first few minutes were uncomfortable. No one was sure what to say. Jenny then saw pictures of our family. Is this your son? As she looked over our 3-year-old's photos, she inquired. Yes, that is Jake. I said, I'm an aunt. After whispering, she broke down in tears. Beth rushed to console her right away. The same Beth. Dad entered my home as if he were a native. With that scarcely concealed approbation that he never used to offer me, I swept over everything. He nodded and remarked, You've done well for yourself. I never would have anticipated that real estate would develop. I crossed my arms, already preparing for whatever the true purpose of this visit was. I was given a chance by Amy's father. Letting the words hang, I said. Beth, who is always the spin doctor, spoke up before the stillness became too oppressive. Unlike some others. Back then, we all made mistakes, she replied in a kind voice. Our goal is to put things right. Amy took the out right away after standing close to the door as if she was waiting for an excuse to leave. Before she could say something she would later regret, she added, I'll check on Jake. Astute. But Jenny didn't have that filter. Her fingertips skimmed the furnishings as she strolled around the living room. She seemed to be attempting to claim the walls. She looked down the corridor and remarked, This house is amazing. There are 5 bedrooms. You only have 1 child, though. I feigned a courteous grin. I stated I was planning for more. We also utilize one as an office. It's none of your business, really. My father put a hand on my shoulder and led the way to my office. Let's discuss ordinary man to man. My first caution should have been that. Son, he settled into my chair as if he owned it. He began. I need to ask you something crucial. I remained upright. What? It's your sister's wedding. Starting a family. He took a moment to consider that, as if it were meant to have some significance for me. They are trying to find a home, but these days, everything is so costly. My stomach began to growl. No. Already I could see the direction this was taking. He went on, pointing about as if he were trying to sell me my own damn house. You've got all this space. 3 individuals can sleep in 5 bedrooms. This is exactly the kind of environment that Jenny and Steve need. You're doing well. Could easily purchase another house. I waited for the joke while I looked at him. Do you really want me to give Jenny my house? Well, he answered, not exactly. As if that somehow improved things. Sell it to them at a discount, maybe. You now earn a nice living. I really went crazy. Get out! I yelled. He let out a frustrated sigh, as if I were the one being challenging. Son, be sensible. It's your sister. You choose the sister instead of me. I didn't care if my voice sounded harsher than I had intended. The sister for whom you expelled me. There was a miscommunication. I let out a loud chuckle. A miscommunication. At 15, you kicked me out. I was homeless. He dared to appear irritated, as if I were bringing up some awkward subject. That was a long time ago. Jenny is in need of Jenny. I raised my voice. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Jenny must. What about my necessities? A parent who believed me. Perhaps before he thought of another one, Beth hurried inside with that phony, worried look on her face. Is everything in here all right? I laughed sharply and without humor. Yes, indeed. Beth, everything is wonderful. I looked over at her. Cute enough to sever. Dad is merely requesting that I give your daughter my house. The one that isn't even his, you know. The room fell quiet. The color faded from Beth's face. Dad stopped. Jenny appeared perplexed, presumably attempting to ascertain whether she had understood me correctly. The entire game shifted in an instant. I left before witnessing the repercussions. I just left my office and went in search of Amy. Jake then discovered them in the backyard. Amy observed Jake as he played with his trucks. She realized something had happened with just one glance at my face. While everyone else was still digesting what I had said, she led Jake inside. Beth tried damage control, telling Dad I was lying, that, as usual, I was only attempting to harm them, the quintessential Beth move. This time, though, Dad wasn't buying it. Perhaps it was because Jenny was standing there, precisely like Mark. Or perhaps he had been skeptical all along. Right then, he wanted a DNA test. Jenny started weeping. Real tears of confusion, not the phony ones like her mother's. She kept wondering what was going on. Why? They were all shouting. Beth seized her and essentially pulled her from our home, accusing me of being envious and attempting to ruin their lives once more. Dad remained. It was a long time before he spoke, simply sat in our living room and gazed blankly. He then inquired as to how I knew. I told him all about how, when I was 15, I saw Beth with Mark in the park and how Jenny resembled him. About how Beth initially didn't believe me and framed me when she thought I might tell someone. I could see the doubt eating at him as he continued to insist that I was mistaken and that Beth would never do that. Suddenly, everything that had never made sense was coming together. Jenny's facial features didn't fit any member of the family, and she had red-brown hair that neither of them had. The following week, Beth was crazy about wanting to keep me away from Jenny. That DNA test was actually completed by Dad. When he received the results, he came to my office. Did not even hold off on going home. Just took a seat, and started crying. The test revealed no chance. He was the father of Jenny. For the last 24 years, everything he believed to be true about his life was false. I ought to have been content, perhaps even joyful. This demonstrated that I had always been telling the truth. However, it left me feeling hollow to see my dad cry in my workplace. I was scared of this man as a child because he always appeared so powerful, but now he seemed totally shattered. He inquired about Mark. Was I aware of his location? What did he do? I told him what little I knew. Mark occasionally visited the homeless location. Usually, they made a mistake. But I haven't seen him in years. I don't know if he's still alive. Dad left my office with the appearance of someone who had aged 20 years in 10 minutes. He wasn't defeated, though. He was enraged. I assumed that would be the last of it. Let them handle the situation on their own. No longer my problem. The next day, Amy phoned me at work. Dad had gone home and misplaced it, it turned out. Beth attempted to twirl it. As usual, the lab must have made a mistake, so the test must have been incorrect. But for the first time, Dad wasn't buying it. He lost his temper as decades of deceit and manipulation suddenly came tumbling down. He did more than yell, he seriously injured her. She is currently in the hospital. 3 fractured vertebrae. According to doctors, she will most likely require pain medication for the remainder of her life. Jenny was the one who phoned the cops. Right there in their living room, Dad was arrested. Since he has a spotless record and his age may be an asset, they are discussing 3 to 5 years. But Beth's family is pushing for the maximum sentence. Jenny, too. Overnight, her entire world fell apart. The wedding's off. Turns out her posh lawyer fiancé wasn't interested in acquiring this kind of baggage. She has been bombarding my phone lately, pleading with me to assist her in locating her biological father. Amy constantly asking me to block them all, to go away and be done with it. She's most likely correct. However, a part of me cannot. It's for Jenny, not for Dad or Beth. None of this was requested by her. Everything in her life that she believed to be true suddenly became false. I then learned today that Beth is already addicted to the painkillers. She was checked into rehab by her family. Jenny, residing with her aunt, refuses to even talk to Beth. Dad's facing at genuine prison time. They make the ideal small family. Gone. As simple as that. And the most peculiar aspect, none of it feels pleasant to me. I believed it would be satisfying to prove that I was telling the truth, that I would at last experience justice, yet it feels meaningless. similar to witnessing a house burn down long after everything has been saved. However, I was just thinking about my family at the time. Amy was finally making use of those additional bedrooms when she became pregnant again, this time with a daughter. Not in the manner that Beth and Dad had anticipated. Sometimes it's funny how life turns out. But 2 months later, everything fell apart. The situation has become much more complex. Dad's trial was last month. I didn't go. My lawyer recommended against it. I really didn't want to watch any of them, to boot. Jenny informed me that he received 3 years. It may have been worse, but the judge took his age and spotless background into consideration. 58 years old. 3 years is a long time. Beth, still in treatment. Turns out she'd been using pain meds well before Dad placed her in the hospital. Jenny was informed by her sister that Beth had been abusing them for years. Just did a great job. Now it makes sense. Why? She was always so paranoid and making up crazy stuff. Her therapy is expected to continue for at least 6 months. Jenny is doing well. She's not doing great. She went out on her own to find Mark, making inquiries in homeless shelters and other locations. Finally found someone who knew him. It turns out that he overdosed and died behind a convenience shop 2 years ago. When Jenny learned the truth, she lost it. She keeps sending me lengthy texts at around 3 in the morning, describing how her entire existence seems to be a lie. Claims that all she can see in the mirror is Mark's face, and that she is no longer able to look at it. Although I feel sorry for her, Amy advises me to avoid her. She is correct. Every time I respond to Jenny, she gets more attached, starts asking more inquiries about the past. The oddest part, Jenny's former fiancé made an attempt to contact me. Wanted to know whether the madness ran in the family, since he's afraid about having kids with her. Told him to get lost. Yeah, Jenny's going through issues, but she doesn't deserve that type of judgment. I discovered that Beth has been telling people that I made up the whole Mark story in order to get even. Even with the DNA test proving Jenny isn't Dad's kid, she is still attempting to paint me in a negative light. In fact, some of our former neighbors think she's real. Small-town folks adore drama, I assume. Amy is doing well during her pregnancy. Our child will be a girl. I sometimes think about Jenny when he was that age while I watch my son play. It makes me question whether things would have turned out differently if Dad had recognized the warning signs sooner. Or suppose I'd informed someone else about seeing Beth with Mark. But you can't change the past, right? The house feels different now. Like all that terrible energy from when they visited is now gone. Jenny's future space is being turned. The father requested that we place her in a nursery for the infant. Amy has everything planned out. Gray and pink color scheme, little stars on the ceiling. I still occasionally think about Tom, that homeless guy who helped me when I first got kicked out. I wish I could share the outcome with him. Prove to him that I accomplished something. I could, he said. Hope he's okay wherever he is. Been getting texts from Dad's side of the family. Some people are angry with him for what he did to Beth, while others are supporting him. They never gave a damn about my whereabouts. I was homeless for all those years. Family can be funny at times. That's pretty much where things are at now. Not sure there's anything else to tell. Life goes on, you know. But to everyone who's been following this story and providing support, regards. Writing everything down was more beneficial than I had anticipated. A special thank you to whoever recommended therapy. You were correct. Jenny sent me a final note yesterday. Stated that she is relocating out of state, beginning anew somewhere. Asked if we could continue communicating. Maybe eventually, but not right now, I told her. I need to spend some time with my own family. I suppose that's it. Story's over, not another drama. No updates needed. You know, sometimes the best retaliation is simply to be happy. Story 4, I'm Selena, a 21-year-old college student who resides on our lovely family home. Well, technically my estate now. When my father died of a sudden cardiac arrest 3 years ago, he left it to me. When we received that heartbreaking news, I was just 18 and just begun college. Dad was gone 1 minute and okay the next. It still hurts to think about it. The house is magnificent. When passing by, it's the type of location that causes people to pause and gaze. 2 stories of elegant architecture, perfectly manicured lawns, and a kitchen that would make any chef jealous. I live here with my mom, who's 48. Dad made sure she'd be taken care of too, leaving her monthly allowance of $3,000 for life. She astonished me with how calmly she absorbed things. No arguments. Don't be upset that I got the house. Dad knew what he was doing, she remarked with a simple grin. One of the things I've always admired about my mother is that her capacity for gracefully managing challenging circumstances. We got into a comfortable routine following Dad's demise. If it could be done, Mom and I grew closer. Every morning, she would prepare my favorite breakfast. We exchange anecdotes about our days and discuss my lessons. Everything was good. Well, at least I thought it was. That's why what occurred a few months ago hit me like a ton of bricks. When I got home from my afternoon lessons, I saw my mother standing in our foyer with two boys and a man I had never seen before. Selena, sweetheart? Mom said, her voice abnormally high. I'd like you to meet John, my spouse. I stood there transfixed. Husband, I must have looked like a fish out of water. I opened and closed my lips, but nothing came out. She went on, as though she were informing me she had purchased new drapes. We got married yesterday. Mom was older than John. His two boys, ages 12 and 14, stood behind him, and I subsequently found out that he was 6 years younger. But it wasn't simply the news that Mom was getting married again that shocked me. It was also the fact that she hadn't disclosed her relationship to me. Not a single conversation, no clues. I was just taken aback. Your new stepfather and stepbrothers are shown here. In stunned silence, I watched as John inspected every inch of my house and ours, as if he were a prospective buyer at an open house. He nodded at the high ceilings, looked into each room, and ran his hands along the mahogany banisters. This is much better than the photos, he remarked, beaming. Living here will be enjoyable for us? My skin crawled at something in the way he said it, but I ignored it. After all, John appeared to be well when we initially sat down to speak. Not exactly warm, but not bad either. He inquired about my academics, made a few jokes that weren't entirely bad, and managed to keep his sons quiet for at least an hour. This might work. Perhaps we could get along after all, I recall thinking. For precisely 2 days, that illusion of possible harmony persisted. Then everything went haywire. Give it back. Jake, 12, yelled at the top of his lungs. It's my turn. No, I've only just begun. Mike, his 14-year-old brother, retorted. Once again, they were squabbling over my laptop, as if it were the last piece of technology left. This was not a singular occurrence. It became the new normal for me. These youngsters quarreled over everything. The TV remote. Who got to use the restroom first thing in the morning, and which cookie got to sit in which chair. I was attempting to prepare for a significant legal exam one afternoon that stands out in particular. I had just gotten into a good rhythm when the door to my room flew open and Jake and Mike, a tangled mess of flying fists and accusations, tumbled in. The chapter on constitutional rights required total concentration. Leave now, I shouted, springing up from my desk. My room is this one. When I won, he grabbed the controller. Jake grumbled. You weren't even playing right? Mike fired back. They resumed their brawl, knocking over my meticulously prepared study supplies. With a thump, my constitutional law textbook fell to the ground, pages bowing under its own weight. Dad, I heard Mike yell, Jake's cheating again! John strolled over to my doorway and leaned against the frame while grinning venomously. They're simply working things out, Selena. Come on. This is how young males learn to manage confrontation. By ruining my room and interfering with my academic work. Incredulously, I asked. Mom came up behind him and touched his shoulder. John is correct, my dear. The lads are simply being boys. They need to learn to sort out their disagreements. I couldn't believe what I was hearing every day. The same thing happened. Screaming, fighting, and breaking things all the time. And it seems that their father and my mother were both quite happy about this. John wasn't finished altering things, though. He called a family meeting one evening, gathering everyone in the living room. He stood in the center of the room, hands on his hips, scanning the place like a general, plotting a fight. He declared, "This house needs some serious work. It's all too feminine. We must make renovations. New furniture, new color scheme, the works." I straightened my posture. Please pardon me. Examine everything. He pointed to the patterns of flowers, the pastel hues. Living in a doll home is like that. We need something more masculine, more befitting a proper family home. I live here, I said forcefully, feeling my blood pressure increase. Dad left it to me, not to Mom, and especially not to you. I'll determine whether any changes are necessary. John's face darkened. Selena, pay attention, ownership is merely a formality. What counts is who lives here and who's the leader of the family. And I got off the couch because I was the man of the house. Let me make something very clear. In this house, you have no authority. You are my mother's spouse, which is why you reside here. And only because I permit it are your boys present. John's face changed instantly, as if a mask were falling off. That phony, nice grin vanished entirely as his eyes sharpened. He was there in front of me in 3 short steps, trying to frighten me with his height. His voice fell to a menacing growl as he growled, "Listen here, you pampered little princess. What I can and cannot do in my own house won't be dictated by some college student. You don't live there," I repeated, standing my ground even as my heart raced, and it never will be. The events that followed appeared to happen slowly. John's face went an unsettling shade of crimson, and he lifted his palm, taking a swing toward me. Mom gasped across the room at the suddenness of the movement, but I didn't flinch. Rather, I took my phone out of my pocket and held it up, putting my finger over the button for emergency calls. "Go ahead," I said, my voice. "I made a call. Tell me why I should call the police." Hearing about a man intimidating his stepdaughter in her own house would undoubtedly pique their curiosity. The danger was as effective as a bucket of cold water. Mom and I were left alone in the living room when John's hand dropped instantly and, without saying another word, he turned and bounded up the stairs. "Selena, sweetheart." Mom's voice was shaking as she hurried onwards. "Things don't have to get this heated. John is merely attempting to adapt to the dynamics of our family. He needs time to get adjusted to things." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she really standing up for him in light of what had just transpired? "He needs to feel like a true man," Mom continued, wringing her hands like the head of the house. "You know how important that is for men, sweetie. Please make an effort to comprehend." I tried to identify the strong, sane woman who had reared me by looking at my mother.